Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CPC Strategy hosted webinar. If this is your first CPC Strategy webinar, welcome, and we hope to see you in more events in the future. Co-hosting with us today is our co-marketing partner, Affinio. Affinio is an AI segmentation platform that analyzes first-party data and social consumer data to uncover new segments and insights and audiences. So all of us here today recognize the importance of building brand awareness in a brand awareness campaign. So today we're going to talk about how to prospect into new revenue-generating audiences for your brand. So first, I want to walk you through the logistics, and let me introduce myself. I'm Annalicia. I'm your webinar coordinator. I'll be handling all your questions in the back end while our speakers are talking about their content, talking about how to generate campaigns and focus on audiences. So before we get into the content, I wanted to let you all know that yes, number one question, recording and slides will be sent out. Recording of this presentation and the slides that you'll be viewing now will be sent out to all registrants within 48 hours. Also as well, I will be adding all the questions that you guys send into a queue and ask our speakers towards the end of the presentation in our Q&A forum. So in the panel to the right, as you see on the slide, the GoToWebinar panel, there'll be an option for you to open up the questions and kind of send anything, any concerns, any questions, any clarifications, or any technical difficulties that you guys might be facing. Just feel free to chat it my way and I'll handle everything over on the back end. Another thing to point out is we do have some resources for you all to download in the handouts. So feel free to download any of those resources. We have some guidebooks, we have some blog posts as well. And lastly, in logistics speaking, I'll be posting a poll question in about a couple of slides just to get a general feel of your audience, of our audience, maybe your familiarities with building custom audiences and how much data you think you have, if you need any more, that kind of thing. So before we get into the poll question, I want to intro CPC and Affinio. So we were founded, CPC Strategy, in 2007, so we're just over 10 years old. We have over 500 active retail clients with a quite diverse portfolio ranging from CPG products to services and other products. And we're a retail-focused paid search management company, and we focus specifically in the realms of Google Shopping, retail-focused paid search like Bing and Google and AdWords, Amazon sales acceleration, creative services, content optimization, as well as Facebook performance marketing. And now I'll let Alex intro Affinio to you all. Alex, you want to come on in?
Sure thing, yeah, thank you. So yeah, Affinio, as mentioned, we're an AI segmentation and visualization platform. We work primarily with brands, retailers, and agencies. We were founded in 2013. We're a Microsoft Accelerator startup, so we came out of that going pretty strong within the retail and CPG space. We work with very large global brands most commonly, and we're partners with Adobe, Microsoft, Oracle Data Cloud. And the solutions we offer are, as mentioned, around AI-driven segmentation and visualization, consumer intelligence. We power content and creative, media optimization, and probabilistic and deterministic targeting within those.
Okay, great. So now I'm actually going to let Alex, you introduce yourself, and then Louis, you can introduce yourself to the audience as well.
Sure thing. So I'm, again, Alex Kevork, VP of Marketing at Affinio. I've been in early to mid-stage technology corporations for 12 plus years now on the marketing front. So excited to be here and excited to talk to you a little bit about how we kind of help solve this problem around audiences and audience targeting.
Awesome, yeah, and thank you, Alex. We're glad to have you joining us today. My name is Lou Brannon. I'm a senior manager of retail search here at CPC Strategy. I am a senior account manager, so I'm actually in the weeds managing accounts for a lot of our clients, and so definitely looking forward to talking to you guys today. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Great, thank you guys. So now I'm gonna kind of go over today's agenda and all the talking points that Lou and Alex are gonna get to today. So the components of prospecting a campaign, understanding an audience-centric marketing funnel, tips on crafting effective prospecting audiences in Google and in Facebook, GDPR implications, as it pertains to data mining, audiences and advertising, the personalization pendulum, how to extract deeper audience insights, and measuring brand uplift with Google Analytics. So before we do get into the nitty-gritty content, I'm going to set up a poll question just to kind of get a bit of familiarity with our audience. And Lou and Alex, I know that you guys can't not see the poll. I know that we talked about it earlier, but I'll read it out loud. So are you currently using customer insights for prospecting campaigns? So I just kind of want to get a feel of who already knows a little bit more in the weeds about how to find new data, if you're making custom or if you're using more automated audiences. So the answers are yes, but I need more data. Who doesn't? No, but I don't know much about audience segmentation, so we're happy if that's your answer and you're tuning in today. And no, just because you do need better data, so you haven't really started branching out. So great. So about the votes are coming in. What do you guys think the majority of our audience? You think that yes, they're building custom audiences? You think a majority of no from your experience with our clients, your clients maybe? Maybe Alex, any thoughts?
Probably yes.
Yes, we got a few. Yeah, we got a good amount of yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same.
Okay, great. So I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share the results. So 38% yes. So good for you guys already starting out in your audience. Hopefully we'll provide some tips on how to strengthen these campaigns. And then 38% no, you don't know much about audience segmentation. That's great. You're here to learn. 25 no, I need better data. Yeah. Who doesn't, right? So about 40% yes, already looking into this, and 60% looking to start, I guess, sometime soon. So I'll pass it on over to Lou now to begin his portion on the audience.
All right, nice. So let's get into it. So first thing we're going to talk about is the components of a prospecting campaign. So today's webinar is going to be a little bit in two parts. My part in the beginning is going to be mostly about kind of basic, kind of entry-level type steps that you can take to get into prospecting. I want to speak mostly to you guys that might not be playing too much in the prospecting realm. Maybe you're focusing only on the bottom part of the sales funnel, maybe doing more direct response, retargeting type stuff. But we want to really impart the knowledge on you that you can do some prospecting stuff. And so we're going to show you the basic components of a prospecting campaign, and then towards the end of the presentation, Alex is going to get a little bit more advanced how you can extract more deeper audience insights. So first of all, let's look at the kind of 4 basic steps of the ideation and the building process of a prospecting campaign. First, you obviously have to come up with your offer or your message that you want to give to your prospective audience. So over here in this part is where that's the first thing that you have to do is figure out what that messaging is going to be. And usually within that stage is where you deal with content creation as well, syncing up with your content team, your design team to figure out what kind of assets you're going to deploy. Secondly, you're going to look at your goal setting. And within that, you usually deal with budgeting as well. What do we want to get accomplished? How much do we want to spend? What kind of return or lift do we want to see? The third piece is really key. That's why it's highlighted there, is audience creation. And this usually is the most time-intensive segment because you have to figure out who do we want to reach. And that part of figuring out who do you want to reach, this is what incorporates a lot of different potential tools or research, manual research, working with an outside agency, a branding agency, working with your internal teams to get any insight on past purchasers, that kind of stuff, figuring out, building all those models. That's a really big key, and that's why I put this little funnel there, because that's where we're going to talk about in a couple more slides about looking at an audience-centric funnel and what kind of audiences you should be building to address the different stages of that audience funnel. And then lastly, obviously, deploying the campaign, and within that is the kind of activation and measurement pieces in terms of getting action from the campaign and then measuring the results of it. All right, so you guys often hear about the sales funnel. I'm sure you're very familiar with a basic sales funnel and marketing funnel, but what we want to talk about is look at within the realm of audiences and building audiences for your advertising campaigns and your advertising platforms. Within the realm of audiences, how can we also think about that as a funnel? So notice here that we have 3 main types of or three main segments here: the awareness segment, the consideration segment, and the action segment. We're really going to focus on where you see that orange indicator there. We're going to focus more on that top to mid-funnel part of the audience segment of the audience funnel. At the top, you see affinity and interest. This is the tactic that an advertiser would use to target people based on what they're interested in or what kind of signals they've given for things that they like and things that they follow. A little bit further down the audience funnel, a little bit more towards the action side, is the in-market and the custom intent. This is where you can see a little bit more of what people are actually shopping for potentially, what kind of actions they're taking to indicate that they potentially are in the market for a product or a service, or what potentially they are searching for on a search engine that you can take advantage of and leverage in your campaigns. And then more towards the bottom is the lookalike and the retargeting audiences. We're not going to focus on those today because we want to talk about prospecting and how you can build that upper funnel and really get in front of new audiences. So we're going to focus mostly on that top portion. All right, so now that kind of basic stuff is out of the way, how do we actually craft some of these audiences? So we're going to focus the next section on the main advertising platforms that we manage here at CPC Strategy, which is Google AdWords and Facebook. And so most of you guys listening are probably very familiar with those platforms. So we're going to look at the main different types of audiences that you can create within those platforms to use for prospecting, and some tips on how to do them in the most effective way. So first, we're going to focus on that very top portion of the audience funnel, which is those affinity slash interest audiences. So in Google, these are known as affinity audiences, but there are two types of affinity audiences. Notice here you have, when you go into a given campaign in a given ad group, and you go into the audiences section to add your audience, you have these different options here. We've highlighted this one because this is where we're going to be focusing on in this section. This says what the interests and habits of your potential audience are, and this includes affinity and custom. And so this is where you would go if you want to build one of these audiences. And so important thing is deciding which ones you want to use. There is affinity and custom affinity, right? Well, affinity, Google themselves defines that as affinity audiences are built for advertisers who are currently running TV ads that want to expand online. This is how you can reach potential customers at scale. So Google is basically telling you here that these affinity audiences are maybe not the tightest audiences that you can make. These are pretty generalized affinity audiences, and this is more in that old TV advertising model where the signals that Google is using are pretty loose. It's more about reaching a broad group of people and scaling it out. So where we like to focus more on is custom affinity. If we're going to utilize affinity groups, we really like to utilize custom affinity. These are more tailored audiences, and they can be created using a combination of interests, places, URLs, and apps. So these are a little bit more performance oriented. And what you do here is you would go into interest and into this section, affinity and custom affinity. You would click in there, and then it gives you this option. Do you want to create an affinity or a custom affinity? You choose custom affinity. And in that section is where you would actually be able to, let me step back. When you go in to build a custom affinity audience, that's where you can start to put in just interests of phrases. Let's say that you are you sell camping products. So in that section, you would want to put in a lot of different keywords and phrases that relate to camping, and you just literally type all those in, and that's giving Google signals. Now, this is not taking people's search activity online and targeting them that way. This is basically targeting your display or your video ads to content that relates to what you're putting in that interest section there. Now, places is interesting. This is actually only for video campaigns, so YouTube campaigns or web video campaigns on Google. You can put in places like supermarket, gym, camping store, things like that, and that gives Google an indication of go out and find people that are interested or that spend time at these places. And then URLs are actually URLs that you can put in, so competitor URLs or similar brands or whatever. You can put those in there to help build that audience. And then the same with apps. Apps are really underutilized, actually. If you know which apps your potential customers might be using, you can actually put those in there, and Google will try to reach people that are using those apps or that are using similar apps. So that's pretty cool. So we definitely recommend, if you have to choose between affinity and custom affinity, if you're looking for more performance, go with custom affinity on Google. So how about on Facebook? You can do the same thing on Facebook, but these are known as interest-based audiences. And we're going to talk more about GDPR in a little bit and how that is the implications on these audiences. But this is a look at a targeting section, the targeting options within a Facebook ad group, ad set. So very similar to Google, you choose to target people based on their interest or behaviors. So within this, Facebook works a little bit differently. You come down to this section where it says add demographics, interests, or behaviors, and you literally can just start typing things in there and it will populate a bunch of different options, or you can go to suggestions or browse and you can look at all of the different out-of-the-box options that you have there. One main thing that we recommend is to, when you're building these interest-based / affinity audiences in Facebook for targeting, you want to utilize a combination of not only just interest, but you also want to layer on top of that some other criteria, like other brands that are similar to your brand or maybe complementary to your brand, based on research that you've already done or just based on even a gut feeling. You want to build a list that's a little bit more specialized, as opposed to just saying, yeah, show me people that are interested in camping, because that's going to give you a large reach, but it's not going to be as refined as potentially people that are interested in camping as well as beach volleyball. They're outdoor enthusiasts, outdoor life. They like the beach, all these different things. And then you can also narrow it down further and say, and people that like or have shown an interest in these other 10 brands that we feel like are similar or complementary. So we also recommend, if you're going to build one of these audiences on Facebook, build a couple different versions of the audience and then test them out and then optimize off of that. One key thing that I want to call out here is notice how it says that Facebook is going to be removing some of these targeting options. So anything that is behavioral, purchase behavior, in this audience, we were actually utilizing people that had shown a purchase propensity for hiking and camping things. But this type of targeting is actually going away as a result of Facebook's changes around data protection and data privacy. This is one of the changes that they've made. And so starting on, I believe, August 17th, you're no longer going to be able to choose behavioral purchase data as a targeting criteria within Facebook. But again, this is how you would create this audience, a combination of interest as well as must also match other interest, and we recommend using that combination of interest and similar brands. Okay, so let's move on to the next, kind of a little bit further down in the audience funnel in terms of consideration, custom intent. Now, we talk about intent-based audiences as a general term to denote any kind of activity that a customer is doing online that gives an advertising platform like Google or Facebook a signal that they have intent to purchase. So if they are in market or if they are searching online, shopping for certain things, Google and Facebook can do a great job of recognizing this intent. Google, moving forward, is probably going to be a little bit more of a better bet for this type of intent audience because of the data protection around Facebook and their lack of being able to use third-party data, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But for right now on this slide, we're going to focus on what's known as custom intent audiences in Google. This is a brand new feature. It's only been available for a few months now. And what it does is it allows you to create a custom combination of keywords, and you can also utilize URLs, but you don't have to utilize both. You can utilize just URLs or just keywords. The older model of this was called audience keywords, and so previously in a display campaign or a video campaign, you could use keywords as a targeting method, but the difference was that in the older keywords targeting method, those keywords were used by Google to identify content to show your ads on. So let's say that you used keywords previously and you said, okay, I want to build a display campaign and my targeting criteria is going to be based on keywords about camping. Well, Google would say, okay, this advertiser is trying to reach, trying to put their ads on the web, on web pages that are similar to camping. So you might see your ads popping up on different websites that relate to camping or outdoors or etc. Now with custom intent, when you type those keywords in that you want to tell Google to target, it's still a display campaign and you're still using keywords to target, but instead of trying to find content that's related to those keywords, Google is actually going to target people on the display network or on YouTube based on what they are typing and searching for in Google, in the search engine. So that's a big difference. So now if we take our top 20 performing keywords, non-brand keywords, generic keywords, or search queries, and we put them into a custom intent audience, now Google is going to say, okay, if people out there are searching for these keywords on Google, then use that as a signal to later serve them a display ad or a video ad when they're browsing the web or when they're on YouTube. And so that's a big difference from the way that those audience keywords were before. And you can't utilize both audience keywords and custom intent. They're basically phasing out audience keywords and switching over to this custom intent model. And the reason they did this is because, people were kind of complaining that the keyword targeting wasn't really that relevant. They were typing in keywords to target, but they weren't seeing their ads show up on relevant content. They was showing up on kind of all kinds of different content that wasn't that relevant. So Google said, you know what, we already have people's search data on google.com. We might as well allow advertisers to target people's search behavior, but use that as a signal to show them display ads and video ads. So this is a really effective way. I do want to call out that we haven't really seen great performance from this yet because it's such a new platform. I think Google's still working out a lot of the kinks with it. We've gotten kind of conflicting feedback from them on how many keywords to use within one of those groups. But I've gotten different Google reps tell me to utilize 1,000 keywords and others tell me to utilize only a few. But the most recent and official recommendation from Google is to utilize about 15 keywords and URLs in combination to build these lists. So the way that you do that is similar. You go into your audience section within a campaign, within an ad group, and instead of the top section, which is interest, you're going to come here to target based on what people are actively researching or planning. And that's where you see in-market audiences and custom intent. You click in there and you have the option to choose between custom intent auto, which is Google's like auto created custom intent audiences. We haven't tested these at all, so I don't recommend using them yet. But you can build your own custom intent audience from here. Down here in this section, you would click this plus sign to build a new custom intent audience, or you can utilize in-market, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But custom intent is pretty cool. Google actually defines this as your ideal audience and built for performance-focused advertisers. These are quotes from Google. So they built this product for people that want to utilize display and video in a more performance-oriented manner as opposed to just pure branding. So this is how it looks when you actually get into the custom intent creation. You can see here we have an example one created. Here on this section here where it says related keywords and URLs, this is where you actually click in and type the keywords that you want. So this is an example of a custom intent audience that we just put together. The blue ones are keywords and the green ones are URLs. So anything with a .com on it will show up as green. Now it can be kind of manual if you're just typing all these in, but let's say you wanted to utilize more than 15 keywords, like maybe upwards of 100, and test that out. You can just bulk upload them or bulk paste them. So you can just take a list of 100 keywords and just paste them right in here in this section and then click enter and it'll spit them all out here. And then you just click create and you have your list, and it'll actually show you additional keywords that you might want to add as suggestions and also the estimated size. And you can see here that just based on this information that we put in, it's telling us that we have potentially 100 to 500 million impressions a month. And so it's still a little bit, I don't know how accurate that is from Google, but nonetheless, we feel like this is a huge advancement in Google kind of audience targeting and prospecting. And we definitely recommend testing and utilizing that. All right, let's move on and talk about in-market audiences. So in-market audiences are in that same kind of segment of where these audiences fall within a customer-centric audience funnel. And so again, these are people that are showing signals of being in market. They're researching or they're shopping for something. So you go just like you would create a custom intent audience or a custom intent audience in that section, but instead of choosing custom intent, you choose in market. And here's where it's going to show you all the different options that you have for targeting. So you want to find the in-market category for what fits your product or service. And so if I'm selling baby products, you can actually get pretty granular with this. Like maybe I'm selling baby education products, childcare education. You can get down to that level of granularity. Same with apparel and accessories. You can get all the way down to like suits and business attire, for example. And so this is really good Google obviously has a lot of signals about what you're doing online, because if you're utilizing Chrome and you're logged into your Google profile, you're searching on google.com, you're browsing different websites, you're adding things to cart, Google takes into account all those signals to profile users as being in market for certain types of goods or services. And again, it can get pretty granular. The difference between Facebook and Google is that for in-market audiences, Google doesn't have to rely on third-party data from an Axiom or a Oracle. They can actually just get this data directly from first-party Google activity. And so that's a benefit for them in this kind of post-GDPR world and where we are right now with data protection. Google, I think, has a little bit of a leg up here with these in-market audiences because, again, it doesn't rely on third-party data. So these audiences, these in-market audiences, do tend to drive better performance in terms of direct response conversions and revenue than the affinity audiences do. But it's similar to the custom affinity audience in terms of performance. So they're kind of in that same realm. And you can use it in conjunction with other criteria. So let's say that you wanted to build a campaign or an ad group that utilize custom intent and in-market in conjunction. You could do that, but what happens is it's different than Facebook is it doesn't refine the audience to like a Venn diagram where you have to meet both criteria. It's either or. So you can utilize both, but it's not really going to refine it further. It's actually just going to give you more reach if you utilize both in conjunction. So we like to build ad groups that utilize like an in-market audience in one ad group and a custom intent audience in the other ad group and test them against each other and see how they perform against each other in terms of click-through rate, engagement, shares, that type of stuff. All right, so those are in-market. On Facebook, in-market is a little bit different. Notice here, and this little bar is a little bit off of center here, but excuse me. On Facebook, this is within an ad set on Facebook, and we're looking at the targeting criteria here. Notice that behavior is purchase behavior. That is basically Facebook's version of in-market. So that is all going away again in August. So you can't utilize this. But what Facebook is doing, which is interesting, and there's been a lot of chatter about whether or not they would do this, and they have started doing this now, is notice that we're using a purchase behavior targeting criteria here, but Facebook is telling us, hey, this is going away soon. If you hovered over this little icon here, it would tell you that this is going to go away in August. But what it does is it gives you suggestions, and it says this is available until August 14th, but we're going to remove it after September 30th. So try using one of these alternatives, and notice that the alternatives are interest-based. They're not behavioral based, because remember, back to what we talked about earlier, those behavioral audiences Facebook pulls from third-party platforms like Oracle and Axiom, and that they're removing all the third-party targeting options from Facebook. So they're actually now offering you these proxy audiences to use instead. And so that's a pretty cool feature from Facebook. We don't really know how those are going to perform in comparison to the old behavioral purchase audiences, but definitely something to be aware of and be mindful of. And it really underscores the importance of how you need to get more granular with your interest-based audiences moving forward, because that's all you're going to have to work with on Facebook now is those interest-based audiences that Facebook can get directly from first-party data within Facebook. So you really need to get granular with them. You don't need to just rely on really broad-reaching categories. You got to do that audience research and focus groups and all that stuff to understand what your ideal customer profile is before you build these audiences. And Alex will speak a little bit more about that later. And again, it just speaks to the pendulum shifting. You know, Facebook is all about data protection now in light of what happened with Cambridge Analytica and the GDPR ruling. So really just underscores the importance of being aware of what's changing and how you need to kind of reevaluate how you're building your audiences. So again, let's talk a little bit about GDPR and what actually has changed. You can see here, this is just to show you how many articles and how much GDPR has been discussed. And if you follow, you know, marketing technology and digital marketing, you see a lot of these, you know, these articles are just a dime a dozen now discussing all the implications. So we've tried to boil it down for you a little bit in this section, And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we could obviously have an entire webinar just on GDPR implications, but want to give you guys just a heads up on what exactly is changing within Google. The main things with Google are, first of all, Google Analytics. Data retention setting is the first thing. There used to not be a data retention default setting. It was just data was set to never expire. But now by default, it's changed to 26 months or 14 months. I can't remember if it's 14 or 26, but you can change that manually. So you would go into the actual admin setting of your Google Analytics property, and you can change that data retention setting to whatever you want, but it's going to start defaulting to 14 or 26 months. So all your that data will be deleted after 26 months or 14. But again, this doesn't affect most of the standard reports in Google Analytics because those are all based on aggregate data. But if you have any specific like user specific reports where you have really granular segments of users based on more granular personally identifiable information, those are going to all be deleted after whatever date or whatever month range you set that to. And again, GA accounts that collect personally identifiable information can be deleted. So if you store personal identifiable information in GA, that's actually illegal and they can delete your account. We understand that they're going to focus this more on European-based companies first, but definitely want to check out, make sure that you're not illegally storing any personal identifiable information. Another thing to call out here is that if you're aware of what's happening with GDPR and that all websites now have to get consent from users to be cookied, in the EU, of course, that's always been the case, or it has been the case for a while, but there's so much more emphasis on being transparent with your website and telling users of your website what you're using their data for, how you could potentially be retargeting them, etc. And so we anticipate that cookie pools and retargeting pools are going to be shrinking a lot for EU. So if you're advertising in the EU, you're probably going to see a lot of your retargeting lists, for example, shrinking. But it could actually be a good thing in terms of performance because the people that are actually still going to be opting into these lists are people that are willing to be retargeted and willing to give you their information to, to have a better experience on your website. So it could actually spell an uptick in performance. And then just quickly, I mentioned Facebook down here at the bottom, but we have another slide for Facebook. There's a lot of stuff that Facebook is doing. The main thing here that we want to really focus on is the fact that third-party categories, partner categories are going to be going away. So we talked about that purchase behavior. This was kind of a linchpin and a key type of targeting for a lot of people when they're doing prospecting on Facebook. But again, that's going away August, September time. So as we talked about in a previous slide, just be aware of that. And then there's also other things around custom, CRM lists. When you're uploading them into Facebook and you're trying to target people based on emails, you have to specify the origin of the audience and make sure that you tell Facebook that you collected that data in a an acceptable fashion based on their policies. And again, third-party tools going away. And so also Facebook is doing a lot more about ad notifications, letting people know why are they seeing this ad, this and that. So there's just a lot of stuff changing on Facebook. Be aware of that. And lastly here, before I kick it over to Alex, even though we talked about how much GDPR has changed things and kind of made it hard to potentially get a lot of prospecting audiences and data on prospecting audiences that you should be targeting. Even back in 2017, this Forrester study showed that 64%, a great majority of marketers say that they need better data for prospecting, and that's similar to what our poll showed, and 56% report having inaccurate data. So this is not a new thing, even in light of GDPR. People have always been looking for ways to build better prospecting audiences, better models, and so GDPR is kind of amplifying that a little bit, but it's always been an issue. So now I'm going to kick it over to Alex to discuss a little bit about the tool that he works with and some other ways that you guys as advertisers can understand audiences better and mine for that data better and extract more value from these audiences. So Alex, yeah, take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Lou. I'm going to click through here and see if I can advance. No, I might need you to advance there, Lou, unless you can give me quick access.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide for you.
Okay, great. So just kind of what I want to talk about here is audience targeting. in this context of GDPR and data privacy and consumer privacy, and sort of where I see, he talked a little bit about this pendulum shift, and where we're seeing this through a lot of the customers that we work with is, as marketers over the past decade, 2 decades, we've become very reliant or conditioned on data. A big part of that is because it's become expected of us. We have access to this data, and so we started using it to justify our decisions, and that made us hungry for more. And we wanted more and more data because it made marketing easier and more predictable and more effective. And the problem is, as we've all seen, is the pendulum has kind of swung too far towards the heavily data-driven marketing where, it got a little creepy. There were some bad actors that took part, Cambridge Analytica, all that craziness. Consumers kind of got a little scared, and it got very public, and justifiably so. And so now where that data access and that use of data is starting to be restricted again, especially from these third parties. And the pendulum is starting to swing back towards this contextual mindset where we actually get to be marketers again. And we like that. We are marketers. We want to be able to think like marketers, but hopefully what we're seeing is that the pendulum lands somewhere in the middle there, where we still have access to enough data to justify our marketing minds and the strategies that we're building as a result. So we can move on to the next slide there. There we go. Sorry, it works for me now.
Okay, nice.
So what does this really mean for personalization? As we talked about here, walled gardens, they're only going to get stronger walls. They're going to get larger. They're going to get thicker. Our access to that data is going to kind of start to go away, and we need to be aware of that. And as part of that, we need to be able to look at all the data that we have access to as marketers, and not think of it in silos. So not think about social data as getting better at social, or CRM data as engaging more of my existing customers, or purchase data as trying to figure out what's going to sell more, or cookie data giving me a better website. That if you're thinking of these each in their own silos, you're going to get kind of myopic or nearsighted insights about your audience. For example, your most valuable customer may not actually be the ones purchasing the most. It can be the people who have purchased, but also influence other people's actions to engage with your brand or purchase from your brand. And so looking at these data sets across as a whole is what's going to help you build essentially a holistic audience. And to apply that to this last bullet here, think beyond one-to-one, think holistically, and look at what your audiences are telling you that are going to help you drive strategy, and thinking about these people as personas, their behaviors, their profiles, and using those as signals to drive your strategy all the way from your marketing to your audience creation, to your activation, to your creative, using that essentially as a currency. I'm going to double click on this a little bit here just to help illustrate the problem. This is a slide that I use a lot to get this point across. We're going to look at 2 different people here, and the problem, if we're looking at one-to-one and not thinking about the bigger picture here, so one-to-one or demographic basis, we're not thinking about necessarily who the person is. We're just looking at attributes about them. So these are 2 people. They're both male. They're both in the 65+ age graphic. They both grew up in England. They're on their 2nd marriage. They've each got 2 children. They are successful, affluent. They holiday in the Alps, and they love dogs. If we look at who these people actually are, besides just the attributes about them, they're very different. One is the Prince of Wales. The other is the Prince of Darkness. And so you might actually market to these people a little bit differently if, say, you're marketing clothing or music. They may engage in different types of things there, but then at the same time, they both might need something like Metamucil, right? So you want to be able to look at, the only way you're going to be able to uncover those insights is by their actions and their behaviors and the profiles of who they are and what they do, outside of just some bullet points about them. Sorry, I might have a little, there we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where this audience-first approach fits in. There's a little bit of Affinio in here, but just in full disclosure. But really, what I want to get the point across here is how, if we look back to one of Lou's earlier slides, and he sort of showed that life cycle or that marketing workflow where it starts with like your theme and your content, and if you notice, audience was sort of that 3rd step in the process. Similar thing here. I've got it in the cycle format, but you've got on the left, upper left, strategy, and you've got things like manual research, data scientists, surveys, and a lot of those, they have inherent bias, they're time intensive, they have high cost, but basically you've got this kind of research living over here on its own that's feeding strategy, and then feeding content and creative often. Those two sort of live together. But then you're going and just trying to figure out in Facebook or in Google who the audience is that you should be targeting with this, and then activating them. And there's a lot in the marketing stack that essentially fulfills that need. The problem is there's no way to connect that stack right now, and that's partly where Affinio comes in. But you can be thinking about this just even as you're looking at your audience strategy and thinking of the audience as a way to connect this stack. If I move on to the next slide, really what you want to do is let your audience, let your understanding of the people be that first step. So look at, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how you do this in following slides, but you want to look at the profiles of the people, the things they care about, their behaviors, their interest patterns, their following patterns, the things that they buy, and build profiles of these customers and let that drive your strategy, and let that be the common currency of your language across the marketing cycle, so that you don't have to guess by the time you get down to audience targeting or building your creative what's going to resonate with them or what audience should be looking at this. You've already defined that on the front end, and it drives your entire marketing strategy and essentially makes the rest of your tools here at the bottom of the cycle more valuable, because you're feeding information into them that you know is going to work, and essentially connects that entire stack. So over here you can see on the left there's an Affinio dashboard, but that really is just representative of a best practice of thinking of an audience and knowing an audience profile and letting that feed your entire strategy. So other ways that you can extract these audience insights, again, we kind of walked through some of this a little bit, but there are other tools out there. I bet a lot of people are using social listening that I'm speaking to now, so the brand watches of the world, the audience insights that you can find directly within Facebook. So instead of waiting until you've built your creative and you've come up with your theme and then advertising to an audience, why don't you start with the audience too, and look at what things resonate with them or what interests may align with those people. Twitter audience insights is another great tool where you can go in and look at these things. Again, they're kind of fragmented here, but still, if you want to dip your toes in the water here and start using an approach of getting an understanding of your persona profile before you start marketing to them, these are great ways to do that.
And Alex, I just want to jump in real quick and say one thing about the Facebook audience insights.
Sure thing.
To clarify for the audience, another thing that has changed as a result of Cambridge Analytica and GDPR is that Facebook Insights now will only show you insights based on people that are connected to your page, so that people that are already following you. But previously, you could actually upload any list of people, whether it be purchasers or any kind of retargeting list that you had that was pixel based, cookie based. You could upload that criteria and you could get insights on that segment, but now it's only based on your own page followers. So that's not necessarily, I mean, that's a big change, but you can still get that report. I just want to make sure that they knew what had changed.
Yeah, sure. And there's another big scenario there where they don't have access to this third-party data either, right? Like the axioms. But that is something that a lot of the people we talk to, even before they ever engage with Affinio, they are looking at that axiom data or that Oracle ODC data and using that to help. It's a matter of connecting that to everything that they do and having that drive their strategy, which is where we kind of come in and help play that through our visualizations and through. I'll talk a little bit about how it works in a minute, but it doesn't mean that you can't be using these existing things that are already out there and starting to think about it this way. You'll quickly see the value of how it can impact when you actually go to activate against these audiences. So I'm going to walk you through an analysis. Again, I mentioned I'm going to be showing you some Affinio screenshots, but this is representative of the way you should be thinking about it, whether you have Affinio or not. So we did an analysis of a major outdoor and sports retailer, and just to give you an idea of what you're seeing here, Affinio it's an AI platform really that it sits on top of any data set. It could be social, it could be CRM, it could be purchase data, and I'm going to walk you through all those. But essentially what it'll do is look at these often millions, billions of data points, and will use machine learning or apply machine learning to identify the commonalities across those data points, the over-indexing traits, and build clusters, and then create visualizations of those clusters and automatically name them based on those commonalities and those traits, so that you can then dive in and say, okay, based on this data, I didn't have to think about this. This is what we call unsupervised. So unsupervised, what I mean by that is this isn't based on any scoring or business rules or parameters that you've put in place or structured your data around. This is more of an unstructured, unsupervised, unbiased way at looking at data points and uncovering these clusters that I may not have even known existed, and traits about them that I wouldn't have known existed, or behaviors or patterns or any of that. So again, I'm going to step back real quick. So we're going to dive into one of these clusters to give you an idea of how you can be thinking about an audience and applying that to your marketing strategy. So hip hop and streetwear is one that we'll dive into. You can see it's up here. And again, this is an outdoors and sporting retailer. So hip hop and streetwear is actually not one that you might have expected. So this is kind of a non-endemic audience, and that's a big value of understanding your audience at the front end. If you remember, something Lou was talking about was hiking and camping gear. It's actually pretty fitting for this demonstration. But on the hiking and camping gear side, he said, maybe let's look at some other brands that they might also be interested in. Well, if you start on with some of this analysis on the front end, you won't have to guess at those other brands that they also have a high affinity for. So you could say, I want to talk to hiking and camping people who also have an affinity for these things. And you can map this directly into your Facebook ad platform or Twitter ad platform or any of the DMPs that you're working in. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a second if we get into hip hop and streetwear. Here are some of the high affinity interests that we discovered, that our platform discovered within this data set. So, we're looking at particular people who came out of this audience, this particular retail's audience, who have a high affinity to hip hop and streetwear. We built this profile about them, and these are the things that they have a higher affinity than the rest of that network at large to have an interest in. And this is based on following patterns. This isn't based on social listening or anything that they've said. These are their following patterns. You kind of want to look at this outside of social and think about it as a focus group, as a massive consumer focus group that isn't reliant on the biases of survey questions. It's their behaviors that are telling us the things about them. You can look at their general gender breakdowns and age breakdowns, but then you want to start to get in and understand things about them, like how they describe themselves in their bios if we're looking at Twitter data, or their location if you've got CRM data or you have that data elsewhere. So kind of starting to look into a little bit of demographics, expanding a little bit outside of that now. And then now we get into really the traits of this profile. What else do we know about them? Who are their top celebrities that they follow? What are the other brands? And here's where some of Lou's content came in. What are the other brands that they follow? So if I'm going to target them, I want to include the things they're interested in, the top brands that they're following, maybe even non-endemic brands, and then advertise to them based on the things that I know about them, their traits. They have a high affinity to fashion over here on the right. They're passionate about hip hop and having access to the latest songs and music, maybe through Spotify. High affinity to professional athletes and sporting organizations. They're very engaged on Twitter, and these are the types of hashtags they're using. We can dig into that a little bit further. What are they actually talking about? What hashtags are they saying? And then where are they talking about? And those are going to be key in when you start to apply this to your advertising strategy, is not just what are people saying or what are people engaging with, but where are they doing it and where am I going to apply my media spend so that I know when I create the things that are going to resonate, it's going to resonate with the people on the platforms that they're used to being on. And so then what about the people who are actually, now that's sort of the third party component, but what about the people who are actually buying my products, interacting with my products in the store? What category do they fall into? What subcategories, or what types of products are they buying? Are they using discounts or not? And then this is a combination of purchase data and survey data. So now I'm understanding, all right, who are my outdoorsy parents? What types of things do they buy? And then I'm coupling that, sort of the magic combination here, is what are they doing offline or purchasing, and then I'm coupling that with third-party signals. So what is it about them that they're doing that they're not deliberately telling me about? And if you can take those together and build an audience based on that data and plug that either, I mean, like we have direct integrations into DMP so that people can literally just take a cluster and plug it in, but you can do that on your own by thinking about these audiences and applying these signals into the filters in your different ad platforms. And it's something that people do very, very commonly, even our existing customers without a DMP integration. They build these, they take these signals and they build them into their ad platforms, and they see massive returns on their investment when it comes to that type of approach and applying it to their actual media spend. And so I'm going to hand that back over to Lou now. I mean, that's basically just the rundown of essentially kind of flipping it on its end and putting audience at the beginning of your strategy so that you know once you get to that third part of Lou's slide there, who you're going to be targeting.
Yeah, I love how you went into in-depth discussion about how you should be thinking about your audience and doing this type of research and leveraging a platform like Affinio or others to inform your strategy in that initial part, because exactly that's what I wanted to get across was that first slide I showed was kind of the traditional way that most advertisers think about it. But in light of all these things that are changing and all the tools that we have at our disposal now, it definitely is beneficial to think about it in that alternate way, like you said. And so I also want, as we wrap up here, the last thing we'll discuss is one of the big bugaboos for people, and one of the big reasons why a lot of advertisers, especially smaller to mid-size advertisers that we work with, might not want to get into, but spending a lot of their budget or any of their budget on prospecting, is because it's oftentimes really hard to measure that impact. A lot of advertisers in the digital world are really focused on ROI, direct response, being able to measure, okay, I allocated this amount of money to this campaign, what's the return from that campaign? They're used to seeing, 3, 4, 5x return on search campaigns and shopping, and even, Facebook dynamic ads and so on and so forth, things that are more focused on the bottom funnel, that it's really hard for them to understand how to measure success of a prospecting campaign. So what I wanted to show you are a couple of case studies. But first of all, how do we measure success? Well, the first thing would be, of course, we want to see if we're running a Facebook campaign or a YouTube or a Google display campaign, for example. We would like to see those direct conversions coming in off of that. We might not see an outstanding ROI on that campaign, but we do want to evaluate just the pixel data, the last click data that's coming off of that, and try to measure an ROI. But we need to go much more beyond that. So what we like to do is set up a report in Google Analytics, which we call brand lift or brand uplift. Brand lift was actually a term that Google themselves coined for their brand lift report, which is a separate type of report that you actually have to pay Google to get. But you can set up your own version of a brand lift or brand uplift report in Google Analytics. And the way that you do that is, let's consider that we ran a 30-day test of a prospecting campaign. We built custom audiences through Facebook and Google, YouTube, and we ran, a specific budget, and we ran this campaign for 30 days. And we want to try to measure the impact that it had on our business as a whole, because obviously we know, and most of you guys know and understand, that when you're investing in the top of the funnel, you're not always going to see those conversions come in right away through that campaign, but people are going to become aware of your brand. They're going to start to research your brand more. They're going to check out reviews. They're going to check out where your products are available. And then ultimately, hopefully, they will purchase from your website if that's your ultimate objective. And so if that's the scenario and you want to measure this kind of holistic lift on your website as a result, there's this report that we put together. What we want to do is we want to evaluate new visitors. So the first part of this report is looking at the user type. So that will actually be your primary dimension when you're building your Google Analytics report, is user type. And we're going to filter for only new visitors, because we're only concerned with these prospecting audiences, these new people that we got in front of. What did they ultimately do? What kind of action did they ultimately take? And so the next thing is the date range. We want to make sure that we're looking at the dates that we ran the campaign, and then comparing that to the previous year or the previous period, whatever is more reasonable for you to look at. We like to look at year over year, but obviously there are other factors that that play in there. So in this particular case study, we ran a prospecting campaign via YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and we utilized a combination of custom affinity targeting, custom intent, and just standard interest-based targeting on Facebook and Instagram. And we looked at the time period, March 1 through June 30, that we ran the campaign compared to the previous year. And we're looking again at only new visitors. And another key thing is what source medium do we want to look at? We only want to look at people that came in directly to the website or through search engines, because the behavior is a new person is exposed to your brand. What kind of action are they going to take later? They're most likely going to search for you, or they're going to go directly to your website. They might not do it immediately, but they're going to do it eventually. So we want to exclude, people that came from your email campaigns or from a referral. We really want to just try to measure that impact on people searching for your brand, and so or going directly to your website again. So that's the report. New visitors only. They came from specific source mediums, which would be direct or paid search or organic search. And then we're looking at just overall e-commerce statistics here. So we can see sessions were up 50%, revenue was up 40%, transactions were up 23%. We did see a little bit of a dip in conversion rate and per session value, but again, we'll take that because we're driving so much new visitor website revenue and transactions on the website. And so this is a basic report that you can build, but it's super effective. And if you guys that are listening are maybe digital marketing managers or coordinators, and you have to report up to a VP, for example, and justify spending on a prospecting campaign, if you have one of those VPs or CMOs that's looking at it and saying, well, I don't see the ROI on this campaign, you have to go beyond that and look more holistically to say, well, look at the impact that we're seeing overall on the e-com site. We're seeing more new visitors transacting and growing revenue. So we really highly leveraged this brand lift report, and we saw a great performance from this particular campaign, and we wanted to highlight that. Another one that I just want to highlight quickly as we're running out of time here is the study that we did with the brand Moon Juice. They wanted to just spend 90%, 89% of their total budget on new audiences. And so we utilized lookalike audiences and also just interest-based audiences, and following all those best practices that we showed before in terms of utilizing that audience research into building your content and targeting it properly and following those best practices. We saw big quarter-over-quarter gains in traffic to the website, as well as a big year-over-year jump, 22% in revenue. So this client was very happy with that, because that was their main objective, was to grow new visitors and grow revenue year over year. So again, you will get results from this kind of stuff. You need to try it. You need to not be afraid to test it. If you have the means and the availability and the need to look into a more robust platform that can help you with that audience insights piece, definitely recommend checking out Affinio or other similar tools. But yeah, if not, definitely you can do a lot of that stuff on your own too. And so hopefully this helped you out. So I'll kick it over to Annalicia to kind of recap and close things out. But thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Lou. So thank you for going over those key metrics as well. I know we got a few questions about how to really measure your campaign. So those case studies kind of put a close to those questions. So thank you. So that concludes our content portion for the presentation. In this webinar, we kind of did provide the basics and the groundwork when it comes to audience building. But if you'd like to go over advanced strategies, you can schedule a one-on-one with our experts at CPC with the link that I'm about to send to you all. That's an offer for an evaluation with one of our experts here in-house to kind of go over your search and your audience campaign building. Then Affinio as well is offering a demo of their social software. Alex, if you want to touch on that briefly as well.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, basically we are offering up the opportunity. If you are interested in seeing a demo, we can run our analysis on your actual audience, so you can see some of this clustering and visualization live on the data that means something to you. So you can just go in to that link, goaffinio.com/request-demo, and just make sure you mention where you came from, and we will walk you through a demo.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I know we're short on time. Thank you everyone for staying in. I'll get to a few questions really quickly. So I have one here from Jamie who's asking, this is more for you, Lou. You mentioned custom affinity performs better than just, your AdWords automated affinity. Is there a significant profitability spike that you see when you create customs? And then do you only recommend custom affinity if you have experience with AdWords, maybe?
Yeah, even if, regardless of your experience level with AdWords, I recommend custom affinity if you are more performance oriented and you actually want to drive revenue and conversions from that campaign. Definitely recommend custom affinity. We have tested them against each other, and what we typically see is that the standard affinity audiences tend to get way more impressions and reach, but the custom affinity groups tend to get much better engagement statistics, better click-through rates. Once you analyze the on-site behavior or the on-site metrics within Google Analytics, for example, you can see that they're spending more time on site, they're more highly engaged. So the custom affinity audiences tend to perform better. But if you're a really large advertiser that is running a TV campaign, for example, and you just want to get an omni-channel, or you want to get an alignment with your marketing across multiple channels and make sure you're bringing that campaign online as well, then probably the standard affinity groups are the best, because it's going to give you the best reach and the most amount of views or impressions. But for the more performance-oriented advertisers, we definitely recommend custom affinity or custom intent or in-market audiences, because they're just telling Google that you want to look at people that are showing more significant signals that they are actually researching or are in the purchase mode for that product. But yes, in terms of custom affinity versus regular affinity, definitely custom affinity tends to do better.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jamie, I hope we answered your question there. And then I just got a couple more here in respect to GDPR negatively affecting your campaign performance. So I'm sure maybe Lou, you can kind of talk to that, as if you've seen a negative impact in your campaign performance on search, maybe even Google on AdWords, since they've limited this kind of customer data, and Alex, if it has affected your social listening as well.
I'll go first. We haven't seen any significant changes yet in our campaigns, because we have very few campaigns that are targeting the EU. So we haven't seen much. I have seen a little bit of a dip in a couple of my clients that are advertising heavily in Europe on Facebook. We've definitely seen some impressions dropping, and also in our Google display campaigns in Europe, we're seeing some dips in impressions, because those cookie pools are shrinking. And so that's mostly on the retargeting side, though. I mean, you still have the ability to target people based on their interests on Google as well as on Facebook. So we're not seeing any majorly pronounced shifts right now, but definitely seeing a little bit of an indication in those retargeting campaigns, but nothing major.
More in Europe.
Okay. We haven't seen a ton here. Again, on the social side, what we integrate with is all public data. But on the what we have seen is the brands that we're working with being more conscious about this, and we're lucky to have a platform that really integrates with any data set. So I mentioned earlier about walled gardens and our customers looking at building essentially their own walled garden behind their own firewall, so that they can just look at their own data instead of having to rely on third-party social data. Because of GDPR. So this is a GDPR PII compliant way for them to do this audience segmentation and clustering based on their own data sets behind their own firewall. So that's been a bit of a higher focus for us as we work with our customers.
Okay, so more proactive protecting right now before anything else. Okay, so I know that there's some questions that I didn't get to. I'll be sure to email you with replies as soon as I can, but I'm going to have to close the webinar just because I know we've taken so much time from our speakers as well as you, the audience. We really do appreciate you spending an hour here with us. We know that your time is very valuable, and we are happy that you have spent this hour with us. So thank you to Alex and Lou, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. And once again, this is Annalicia, and we're signing off from CPC Strategy in San Diego.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.